Well, I want to see how a bot works. I want to go capture the raw executable. So a couple different ways you can do it. You can actively do it. I think I've heard there's a malware site, so Russian hosted site. I can download the latest version of some new exploit and the code that makes it happen with a nice click and drool exploit this box. Click here. Now you can actively go out by FTPing it. You can actively go out by using a vulnerable browser or application that another exploit, executable will attack. Say, for example, a vulnerable web browser, say like Internet Explorer, and I want to find attacks that attack that browser. I just basically, go to believed bad sites with my vulnerable browser, and hopefully I pick up some malware that I can later analyze. Or you can simulate it. You can use a honey client to go out and get it. Okay, fairly straightforward. You're going out trying to get this. And then you have the passive stuff. You can build a honeypot or net that's basically sitting there going, hey, attack me, come on, where are you? Oh, hi, Mr. Nasty executable, come on in. And you save a copy and there you go. Or you can, actually collect it from end users who have said, hey, my box has been exploited. There's some interesting code here, let me go play with that. So those are the methods to go get malware. What's possible that you can screw up that you can go get arrested or sued in a civil action for that work? Okay, and I've actually talked to someone who did this. They misconfigured a tool to go out and check for vulnerabilities. It was broken. It basically DOS'd some guy in the UK, and it activated a script that sent SMS messages to all of his, he ran like a heating, ventilation, air conditioning company. The guy who was attacked had SMS messages going to their cell phones saying and it was kind of like an idea to say go to this address and go fix their stuff. And they had a really nice little web script or a script on their web server that would allow the guy who was running the company to kind of click and say, go here, do this. Unfortunately, the guy who went to me and asked, he wasn't really my client because I wasn't practicing law yet, he wrote the script to go out and find vulnerabilities. Well, it basically hammered this Scottish guy's server, and he sent several thousand SMSs to all of his workers. So, and I think they were charging like 10 pence per. So the guy gets a several $1,000 cell phone bill, and traces it back to my guy who's like, there's this guy in Scotland who's fucking pissed, And understand, well, why? What happened? He's like, well, I wrote this, so you're going out looking for vulnerabilities. you wrote it, it's yeah, it seemed to be, it broke his server interestingly. Okay. And he's like, oh, and I'm like, yeah, that sucks. He's like, no, you're a lawyer. Yeah, and can you sue me? I'm like, and I'm kind of doing this, holding a beer for 5 minutes. He's like, that's not good. I'm like, okay, how about this? I'll call you tomorrow. And eventually figure out, look, offer him $100 and say I'm sorry. And that's what worked. But imagine instead if you did that to someone who was angrier than, than the Scottish guy, because the Scottish guy can't really, come to the United States and sue him, and we're not going to see, Mr. McHaggis flying over, going, "I want justice." It's just funnier because it's a Scottish accent. I can't really do that well. But imagine if it's instead you do that to a mid-sized company, and you just pound the shit out of one of their boxes because your honey client's just misconfigured. You're like, oh, it should hit a random site 60 times a second, and instead you just basically have it, have your thousands of honey clients all pound their server. Boom, they go down. Oops, you've inadvertently done a denial of service attack that you weren't intending to do. It's possible. So if you negligently, and the negligence is the important word, if you intentionally do it, that's it. You've now committed a criminal act. But if you negligently, you just, oops, I used the sample config file as opposed to writing my own. Is it bad if we just basically pipe everything a T3 can do to, Bob's plumbing supply? Oops. I think Bob's going to be pissed. That was sort of the big hypo. You could also potentially get a nuisance tort, as you used your property in such a way that it screwed with my property. I haven't read of any of these cases yet, but a lot of computer geek lawyers are like, this is going to be, someone's going to sue under this and eventually win. Okay, what about this? Downloading from a malware repository. And I wrote a paper about, well, I half wrote a paper about this because I keep on like looking at it and going, I have other work to do. But the hypothetical is, you could have a malware repository because you're Symantec. You could have a malware repository because you're, Leet Dude 94 who likes putting virus code on the web. They're both malware repositories. If you illegally download from Symantec, Symantec is going to come after you because it's like, you should buy a subscription if you want to do research from our stuff. Versus Leet Dude is, in his basement working at Kinko's. He's not going to be able to come after you for faking a login and going and taking his stuff. But it's potentially a violation of contract, and with the changes in the interpretation of 1030, it may actually be a criminal act to spoof a username, go in and download someone's malware. The chances you're going to get sued by an actual criminal is 0, because it's really hard. It's like, people calling up 911 going, dude, we got ripped off on this Coke deal? I mean, it still happens, but it's really unlikely that, yeah, we run a ware server and a virus malware coding site, and this dude downloaded a bunch of stuff. And, we have spammers to serve, man. We're starving here. I'm sure it's not going to happen, but if you're an actual, no, we're not hackers, we're security researchers. Those people might actually go and hire someone like me to go and, right behind the RIAA going, do you have any stuff left? We'll take that. Okay, passive capture legal issues. If you've configured your honeypot or net correctly, it's possibly nuisance if you used actual live machines. Instead of building like a true emulated honeynet, where it's, like I have a Linux box playing like it's a bunch of unpatched Windows 98 boxes. But if you actually had, like, hey, I got a bunch of unpatched 98 boxes as my honeynet, if it gets compromised and is used to attack someone else, it's potentially a nuisance claim. I'm going to give the FUD alert now. It's not actually no one's actually been sued for it, but it should be out there. So if you should monitor any honeynet, honeypot that you're running to make sure it's not actually, fucking with other people. And the final one, end user collection. If it's without permission. And I'm trying to think like how you would do this without permission. Like, oh, I'm going to go and haxer into a box that's already been infected and yank out the bot and patch the system. And I've talked to people like, oh, I've got this great idea. It's going to be a white bot. It's going to go out and look for bad bots and delete the bad bot and patch the system so it doesn't happen again. And I thought, that works, that would be cool, except it violates federal law. And what if you get it wrong? What if there's a vulnerability in your own code and you basically go and unpatch thousands of systems? You're going to be Mr. Popular. So the unlawful access, if you're capturing live packets, I don't know how you do that with an end user collection unless you're maybe, I'm going to capture without permission. Now, if you get permission, if you're the IT guy at installation, you just say, I'm gonna go pull code off your box. Or you could just say, it's our box, it's the company's computer, we're allowed to do whatever we like to it. So it's really for this hypothetical, I'm gonna go out and download code off of your machine without you ever knowing about it. Okay. This is also the hypothetical, the reverse engineering, like could a malware manufacturer sue you under the Digital Millennium Copyright Act? And I thought, that's the most masturbatory question I've come up with today. It's like, no, that's more like, dude, we were doing a drug deal, calling up 911, we're doing a drug deal and I shot this guy and the coke's bad. Like it's like double whammy. Like it's not really gonna happen, but I thought of, What about Gator? Remember, the I'm going to trick you into downloading my malware. Well, potentially that's a company that might sue you for doing a reverse engineering on their code if they have some form of encryption to protect you from, well, reverse engineering their code to figure out what it does. And I thought, like, if that happens, it'll be interesting to watch. I don't know yet. It's out there, but that's like, you should worry about that about as much as a meteor. Like, that level of fear. Like, yeah, that would be bad. About that likely. Going back to the idea, if you're running a sandbox, you inadvertently compromise other systems with your sandbox, bad. Publication. The biggest one you're going to run into is libel and slander. This has been used, Gator, where you say you pull a piece of malware off, you reverse engineer it, and you say, this is malware. This is the worst piece of software, and I wholeheartedly say that, Microsoft Office is malware. You're going to get a phone call from Microsoft because you have slandered their product by calling it malware. You would have to then defend by saying, geez, it is malware, but really you don't want to ever get into litigation with Microsoft. Just because it'll just, like, wow, we won! We spent $8 million to defend this! I'm broke. Great. But libel and slander requires a negative, untrue statement of fact. And it has to be a statement of fact. It cannot, if it's mere opinion, it's, you are a bad person. Great. It's a statement of opinion. You are a dishonest person. That alleges fact. So you could potentially look at a lawsuit if you describe something from a legitimate company as this is malware. So you want to make sure you got all your ducks in a line. You want to, like, back it up with facts. Trade secret. If a vendor has given you controlled secrets, stuff that we say, you have to sign an NDA. You can't show this to anyone else. If you divulge that information in your botnet research, I don't know how that would happen, but it should just be in the back of your minds. If somehow you're, like, playing with someone else's code, that you're like, how is this, how will this be attacked by bots? Like, Microsoft's doing their next generation of an operating system. Yeah. Okay, it's a fantasy. Maybe Cisco, because I know people have gotten in trouble for divulging Cisco trade secrets. And the divulgement. If you illegally intercept packets, you are not a provider. Instead, you are just, Joe researcher, and you're sniffing packets from between a botnet herder and an individually compromised PC. If you're also sniffing packets that they're using legitimately, say, for example, it's my laptop's compromised, I'm sending an email to my wife while the botnet herder is sending transmissions. If you broadcast my stuff, you may have illegally, you have violated my rights. I may have a lawsuit against you. Okay. Next step, talking about monitoring of herders. You can either sniff packets between the IRC channel that's running the botnet, or actively, log in and act like a bot. The biggest problem is what I like to call the mixed server. If a botnet herder is using a legitimate server, as in it has other non-bot related traffic, you may possibly run into a 2511 violation because you're sniffing packets that you're not supposed to. Now, you have a defense by saying, these weren't intended, these are published. Like, anyone can log into this IRC channel. So they are broadcast. I'm not sniffing packets, I'm receiving them. And that's an invalid defense. But you're now in a gray area where you might have to go and actually have to raise that defense as opposed to saying, like, look, you can't charge me at all. I drew a little schematic here just to show where you might be doing sniffing. So we have an infected box, and okay, infected box, an IRC server, and a herder. Infected box says hi to the IRC channel, IRC server, then that gets transmitted through to the herder. Herder sends commands back to the infected box. Okay, we have a researcher who wants to sniff all that. That's interception. Now, of course, it might be there's a low chance